It started with a flicker. Not a light, not a fire, but a shadow moving in the frame of the window across the way. Our neighborhood is the kind of place where you know your neighbors by the cars in their driveways and the way their lawn looks after a long week. It's quiet, predictable, and safe. That's what I told myself when we bought the house 3 years ago. It was the American dream, the whole package. A 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch, a picket fence that needed a fresh coat of paint, and a backyard big enough for a dog we kept promising to get. We were the young couple on the block, the ones who still held hands in the grocery store and argued over what color to paint the guest room. We were in love, or at least I was. I thought I knew what that word meant. The window belonged to our neighbor, a guy named Marcus. He lived alone in a house that was almost identical to ours, just mirrored. We'd wave to him when we were both getting the mail, exchange pleasantries about the weather or the goddamn HOA, but that was it. He was a project manager for some tech company, worked from home a lot, and kept to himself. He was handsome, in that effortless, rugged way that guys in their late 30s sometimes are when they haven't let themselves go. He had a salt and pepper beard and a smile that seemed a little too easy, like he knew a joke you weren't in on. My husband, Mark, liked him well enough. They'd talk about golf, a sport neither of them actually played, and stand in the driveway with their hands in their pockets, nodding along to some conversation about interest rates. I'd watch from the kitchen window, the one above the sink, and I'd feel a pang of something I couldn't name. It wasn't attraction. It was more like a quiet alarm, a subtle whisper that told me to pay attention. I ignored it. I was good at ignoring things. The first time I noticed the window was open, it was a Tuesday in late spring. The weather was just starting to turn, that humid warmth that clings to your skin and makes the air feel thick. I was in our bedroom, folding laundry and mindlessly staring out the window. My eyes drifted to his house, to the second-floor window directly opposite ours, and I saw him. He was standing there, just inside the frame, holding a glass of amber liquid. He wasn't doing anything scandalous. He was just there, looking out. A solitary figure in a darkened room. The light was on behind him, illuminating his silhouette. Our eyes met. I felt a jolt, that electric shock of being caught staring, and I quickly looked away, my cheeks flushing with a heat that had nothing to do with the weather. I laughed it off to myself, a nervous little giggle, and told myself he probably hadn't even seen me. It was just a coincidence. But the next night, the window was open again. And the night after that, it became a routine, a secret I didn't even admit to myself that I was keeping. I'd find myself drawn to that window, my gaze pulled there like a magnet. I'd be brushing my teeth, and my eyes would drift up to the reflection in the mirror, looking for the light in his window. I'd be lying in bed next to Mark, his breathing slow and steady in sleep, and I'd be staring at the ceiling, my mind's eye fixed on that open frame. I convinced myself it was harmless curiosity. He was just a neighbor, a fixture in the landscape. It was like watching a movie on a screen you could only see from your own house. I was in the audience, not part of the story. But the truth was, I was starving for something. Mark and I had become like 2 ships passing in the night, living parallel lives under the same roof. Our conversations were checklists. What's for dinner? Did you pay the electric bill? I'll pick up the dry cleaning. The passion had cooled to a lukewarm convenience, a comfortable silence that I had once mistaken for peace. Now, it just felt like loneliness. He started leaving the light on. Just a single lamp, casting a warm, golden glow that spilled out into the darkness. It was intimate, that light, like he was inviting someone in. And I, the fool, took the bait. I'd sit by our bedroom window, pretending to read a book, but my eyes would be tracing the lines of his room, trying to piece together his life from the shadows and the furniture. I saw a guitar in the corner, a stack of books on a nightstand, a framed picture on the wall. These were the artifacts of his life, and I felt like I was decoding a map. One night, I saw him talking on the phone. He was pacing, running his hand through his hair, his posture tense. He looked stressed, vulnerable. It was a raw, human moment that I had no right to witness, and yet I couldn't look away. He was so different from Mark, who was always so controlled, so even-keeled. Mark's emotions were like a lake on a windless day. Marcus's were a stormy sea. That vulnerability, that show of feeling, was the most attractive thing I'd ever seen. Mark never noticed. He was absorbed in his own world, in the glow of his laptop, in the endless scroll of his phone. He had stopped seeing me. He looked at me, but he didn't see me. I could have been a piece of furniture in the room, something he was just used to. We had sex, but it was mechanical, a routine obligation. He'd kiss me goodnight on the forehead, the same way he'd kiss his mother, and then he'd roll over and go to sleep. And I'd be left there, wide awake, my skin still tingling with an unfulfilled need. The window across the way was like a promise, a reminder that there was still passion in the world, that people still craved each other, that they still felt something real. I was watching someone else live, and it was only a matter of time before I wanted to be part of the action. A few weeks later, I was outside watering the hydrangeas, a task I dreaded but Mark insisted was crucial for the property value. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the sun was beating down hard. I was wearing a pair of cut-off shorts and a tank top, my hair piled up in a messy bun. I was covered in sweat and dirt, feeling far from my best. I heard a door creak open and looked up to see Marcus walking across his lawn, holding his own hose. He was wearing a plain white t-shirt that was just a little too small, stretching across his chest. He had a bottle of beer in his other hand. He grinned when he saw me. "Watering the flowers," he said. It wasn't a question. It was an observation, like he was acknowledging the performance we were both putting on. "It's that or let them die," I said, trying to sound lighthearted. My husband's very particular about curb appeal. "Ah," he said, taking a sip of his beer. "Well, you can't have a house that doesn't match the neighbors. It's the suburban code." He gestured with his bottle toward his own lawn, which was immaculate. I'm more of a survival of the fittest guy myself. If the grass can't handle it, it doesn't deserve to live. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh, the kind that surprised me. I felt my cheeks flush. "I think my hydrangeas are about to be evicted then." He smiled, that easy, knowing smile, and he walked a little closer. "They're not that bad. You just have to be consistent. A little love every day." He looked right at me, his eyes holding mine for a beat too long. The plants, I mean. I felt my breath catch in my throat. The air between us crackled with a strange energy. The way he said it, the way he looked at me, it felt like he was talking about something else entirely. I mumbled something about needing to check the grill, which wasn't even on, and I fled back inside the house. My heart was pounding, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I leaned against the kitchen counter, trying to calm myself down. I felt like I had just been caught doing something wrong, like he had seen right through the careful performance of my life and found me out. But that was the problem. He hadn't. I was the one who was looking. I was the one who had been watching him in the dark. I was the one who felt that undeniable pull. I went upstairs and stood by my window, staring at his house. His curtains were still open. He was back inside, a silhouette moving in the kitchen. I saw him glance up, and I knew with absolute certainty that he could see me standing there, a silhouette in my own frame. And I didn't move. I just stood there, letting him watch me back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, the sheets tangled around my legs, my mind racing. Mark was beside me, an oblivious lump under the covers. I looked at him, at the familiar curve of his back, the soft snoring, and I felt a wave of resentment. It was ugly and bitter, and it made me feel like a monster. But it was there. I was angry at him for making me feel so invisible. I was angry at myself for needing the validation of a stranger to feel alive. I looked out the window. The light was on in Marcus's room. He was standing there, just looking out. He didn't have a glass in his hand this time. He was just there. His hand was resting on the window frame. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could feel him looking at me. It was a tangible thing, that gaze. It felt like a physical touch. I got out of bed. I walked to the window. I stood there, face to face with the man across the way, separated by a gap of 50 feet and a world of unspoken things. I didn't wave. He didn't wave. We just stood there, two people in the dark, looking at each other. My hand drifted to the window pane. I pressed my palm against the cool glass. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, a surrender, a confession. I saw him raise his hand and mirror the movement, his palm flattening against his own glass. We stood there for what felt like an eternity, this silent, electric communion. And in that moment, I knew the window wasn't just a window anymore. It was a door. And I was standing right in front of it, my hand on the knob, ready to walk through. I was about to betray my husband, not with my body, not yet, but with my heart, with my mind, with the simple, devastating fact that I was no longer just watching the movie. I wanted to be inside it. I wanted to be the star of his story. And the scariest part? I didn't care about the consequences. I just wanted to feel something other than the crushing weight of my own empty, comfortable life. I wanted to feel the heat of a fire I hadn't started. I wanted to burn. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach that felt like a fist. Sunlight was pouring through the window, harsh and unforgiving, and for a split second, I hoped the whole thing had been a dream. That strange, magnetic pull, the silent hand on the glass, the way my own body had betrayed me by walking to that window without my permission. But it wasn't a dream. The memory of it was seared into my brain, vivid and hot. I could still feel the cool of the glass against my palm, still see his silhouette mirroring my movement, like we were dancers in some twisted, invisible ballet. Mark was already up. I could hear him clattering around in the kitchen, making his protein smoothie, the sound of the blender like a jackhammer against the morning quiet. I lay there for a long time staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together the person I had become. I was a woman who had just had an emotional affair with her neighbor through a window without a single word being exchanged. How did that happen? How did my life get so small that this became the most exciting thing I had done in years? I forced myself out of bed and went through the motions. Shower, coffee, a smile for Mark that felt like it was made of plastic. He was scrolling through his phone at the breakfast table, reading some news article about the stock market, and he didn't even look up. He just grunted a good morning and asked if I remembered to call the plumber about the leaky faucet. I said I did. I hadn't. I couldn't focus on anything. My mind was a broken record, stuck on the image of him, of Marcus, standing there in the dark. I was desperate for a sign, for something to tell me I hadn't imagined the whole thing. I wanted to go to the window to see if his was still open, but I was terrified of what I would find, terrified he wouldn't be there, terrified he would. The hours crawled by. I tried to distract myself with chores, with a book, with anything, but nothing worked. I was a woman possessed. Every creak of the house, every car that drove by made me jump. I felt like a teenager with a secret crush, giddy and sick with it all at once. Then, around 2 p.m, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from our neighborhood app, the one we all use to complain about loud parties and lost cats. It was a message from a profile I didn't recognize, but the name was obvious. Marcus. He had found me. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. The message was simple, just a few words, but they hit me like a freight train. Hey, saw you looking at my hydrangeas. They could use some advice. Want to come over for a drink later and I'll share my secrets? It was innocent. It was a perfectly neighborly thing to say, but we both knew it wasn't about the goddamn hydrangeas. It was an invitation. It was a door opening. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long time. I typed out a dozen different replies and deleted them all. I thought about Mark, about my vows, about the life I had built. I thought about the sterile, passionless existence that was slowly suffocating me. I thought about the way my hand had pressed against the glass in the dark, a silent prayer to a God I didn't believe in. And I thought about the thrill that shot through me when I saw his name on my phone. I wanted to feel that again. I needed to feel that again. I typed back, 7 p.m? He replied instantly, I'll have the wine ready. The next few hours were a blur. I took a shower, spending far too long in the steam, trying to wash away the guilt that clung to my skin. I put on a sundress, a simple one I had bought years ago but never had the occasion to wear, It was light and flowery, and it made me feel pretty in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I put on a touch of lipstick, the color I used to wear on date nights with Mark, before date nights became just another item on the to-do list. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She was dangerous. She was excited. She was someone I had locked away a long time ago. I told Mark I was going for a walk, just to clear my head. He barely looked up from his laptop, just waved a hand and said to be back before dinner. He didn't ask where I was going. He didn't ask if I wanted company. I was just a ghost in his house, and he was so used to me being there that he couldn't see me fading away. Walking across the lawn to Marcus's front door felt like walking across a bridge over a canyon. Each step was a decision I couldn't take back. The world felt hyper-real, the colors too bright, the sounds too loud. I could hear my own heartbeat. I reached his door and knocked before I could lose my nerve. He opened it almost immediately, like he had been waiting right behind it. He was wearing a simple linen shirt.
ও তুই সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ, সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ আমার সরল দিলে, দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে, ওরে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ, সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ আমার সরল দিলে, দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে, ওরে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। আমার খাইলি আমার পড়লি তবু দিলি জ্বালা, কি যে খেলাম শুনতে খারাপ দিয়া তোরে মালা। ও আমার খাইলি আমার পড়লি তবু দিলি জ্বালা, কি যে খাইলাম শুনতে খারাপ দিয়া তোরে মালা। সাদা দিলে লাগলো কাদা, সাদা দিলে লাগলো কাদা, কান্দিরে আড়ালে, দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে, ওরে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন জমিদার মিলে। জানি তো হবে এমন, জানতাম যদি আগে, তবে কি আর প্রাণ থাকিবে তোরে মায়া লাগে। ও কে জানি তো হবে এমন, জানতাম যদি আগে, তবে কি আর প্রাণ থাকিবে তোরে মায়া লাগে। কয় মল্লিকে বাঁচি এখন, কয় মল্লিকে বাঁচি এখন, আপদ বিদায় হলে, দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন জমিদার মিলে, ওরে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। ও তুই সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ, সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ আমার সরল দিলে, দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে, ওরে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে। সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ, সুযোগ পায়া দিলি দুঃখ আমার সরল দিলে, দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে, ওরে দেখবো আমি তোর কপালে কোন ব্যারিস্টার মিলে।
He smiled that easy smile and stepped aside, gesturing for me to come in. His house smelled like sandalwood and something else, something warm and masculine. It smelled like a home that was actually lived in, not just curated. His living room was comfortable, lived in, with books stacked on every surface and a record player in the corner. It was the polar opposite of my house, which was decorated for perfection, for the approval of guests we rarely had. He offered me a glass of red wine, and I took it, needing something to do with my hands. We talked about nothing for a while: the weather, the neighborhood, the neighbor with the yappy dog 2 doors down. But there was a charge in the air, a current that hummed beneath every word. He was studying me. I could feel it. He was looking at me the way I had been looking at him for weeks. He wasn't just seeing my surface. He was seeing me, the real me, the one I had been hiding from everyone, including myself. Then he said, "I see you," in the window. It was so direct, so blunt, that I nearly choked on my wine. I felt my face flush. I opened my mouth to lie, to deny it, to say I had no idea what he was talking about, but the words wouldn't come. He held my gaze, his expression serious. "I see you there, at night, looking out. You look lonely." He saw it. He saw the emptiness I had been trying to fill with furniture and gardens and polite conversation. He saw the hollow place inside me where my marriage used to be. And the terrible, shameful truth was, I was relieved. I was so desperate for someone to see my pain that I didn't care that it was a stranger doing the seeing. I didn't care that it was wrong. I just felt seen. I broke down. It wasn't a dramatic sob, but a quiet, slow leak of tears that I couldn't stop. He didn't reach for me, didn't try to comfort me in a way that felt forced. He just sat there, letting me be. He let me cry. "I don't know why I'm here," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I shouldn't be here." "You're here because you're looking for something," he said, his voice low. "And I think I'm looking for the same thing." He told me about himself then. Not the surface stuff, but the real stuff. He told me about his ex-wife, a woman he had loved fiercely, who had left him for a man who was more successful, more ambitious. He told me about the loneliness that had settled into his bones, a constant ache that he couldn't shake. He told me how he had given up on love, on the whole idea of it, because it was easier to be alone than to be that vulnerable again. He spoke with a raw honesty that made me feel like I was the only person in the world. It was a confession, an exchange of secrets. We were 2 wounded people holding up a mirror to each other. I told him about Mark, about how we had started as this passionate, all-consuming fire, and how it had slowly died, starved of oxygen by routine and resentment. I told him about feeling invisible, about the nights I would lie awake next to a man who felt like a stranger. I told him about the endless silence. I felt lighter telling him. The words poured out of me like water from a broken dam. I was giving him the keys to my unhappiness, handing him the map to all my broken places. And instead of being frightened, he took them. He looked at me, his eyes dark and warm, and he said, "I know exactly how you feel." He leaned forward, just a little. I could smell his cologne, something clean and expensive. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. "I could see you were hurting," he said, his voice a low murmur. "All those nights you stood in the window. I could see it in your posture. You looked like you were waiting for something to happen." I breathed. I was waiting for someone to see me, to tell me I wasn't crazy. "You're not crazy, Alina," he said, and the sound of my name on his lips was like a warm bath. "You're just forgotten, and being forgotten is a special kind of hell." He reached out then and brushed a strand of hair from my face. His fingertips grazed my cheek, and it felt like a brand. It was fire. It was the most alive I had felt in years. I closed my eyes, leaning into his touch. I let myself have this one moment, this one tiny, forbidden sliver of happiness. But then the guilt came crashing back down. I pulled away, my body jerking back like I had been burned. I stood up, nearly knocking over my wine glass. "I have to go," I said, my voice shaking. "I can't do this." He didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, calm and steady. "I'm not asking you to do anything," he said. I'm just glad I met you, Alina. That's all." I walked home in a daze, the world around me feeling like a painting I was walking through. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass and the distant sound of a lawnmower. I let myself back into my house, and it felt foreign. The hallway, the photos on the wall, the smell of our house, it was all the same, but I was different. I had changed. I walked past Mark, who was still glued to his laptop, and he didn't even say hello. He didn't see the flesh on my cheeks or the wild look in my eyes. He didn't see me, the real me, the one who had just been touched by another man and had felt the world spin on its axis. I went upstairs to the bedroom and stood by the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I looked across the way. His window was open. The light was on. He was standing there, looking right back at me. He raised his hand in a tentative, almost shy wave, and I did something I never expected. I raised my hand back and waved. I was in the game now. I had crossed the line, and there was no going back. The guilt was a constant companion that night. I lay in bed, my body rigid with tension, my mind churning. I felt like a traitor, a spy in my own home. But alongside the guilt was an intoxicating feeling of being alive. I had been sleeping for so long, and now I was awake. The silence in my bedroom felt suffocating. Mark's breathing, the ticking of the clock, the hum of the air conditioning. It was the soundtrack of a life I had outgrown. I got out of bed and went to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror and saw the same woman who had been crying on a stranger's couch just hours earlier. But there was something else there now. A spark. A defiance. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a woman with a secret. And secrets, I was learning, have a life of their own. They grow in the dark, and they don't stay hidden forever. I spent the next few days in a fog. I was walking through my days, performing my duties as a wife, but my mind was elsewhere. It was in his living room. It was on his couch. It was in the way he had said my name. I was having an emotional affair, and it was consuming me. I began finding excuses to go outside, to be in the garden, to be anywhere that gave me a view of his house. Mark was still oblivious, wrapped in his cocoon of work and routine. He asked me if I was okay once when he caught me staring blankly at the fridge. I said I was fine, just tired. He accepted it too easily. He wanted to believe I was fine because it was easier than dealing with the alternative. I was getting away with it. The thrill of getting away with it was almost as addictive as the affair itself. On the third day, I got another message from him. "It's getting dark early now. The view from here is spectacular. You should see it." I knew what he meant. He wanted me to stand in the window again. He wanted to see me. He wanted to continue our silent conversation. And I, the fool, the desperate fool, was more than happy to oblige. That night, after I was sure Mark was asleep, I walked to the window. I didn't turn on the light. I stood in the darkness, a silhouette against the faint glow from the streetlights. I looked across the way, and there he was. The lamp was on in his room, casting that familiar warm glow. He was standing there, and he had a glass in his hand. He raised it in a silent toast. I felt a smile spread across my face. It was a dangerous game we were playing, but I was too far gone to care. I wanted to play. I wanted to win. And I was willing to risk everything to feel this alive. The heat was building, and I was ready to burn. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks blurred into a fever dream of stolen glances and whispered conversations. We didn't just talk in the windows anymore. We had graduated to a full-blown, secret relationship that existed in the margins of our real lives. We'd meet for coffee at a dingy diner on the other side of town, where no one knew our faces. We'd take long drives in his car, the windows down, the wind whipping my hair around my face. And we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. He told me about his childhood in Ohio, his dreams of being a musician, his deep-seated fear of ending up alone. I told him about my own insecurities, the pressure to be perfect, the way I felt like I was drowning in a life I had chosen for myself. He made me laugh. He made me feel beautiful. He made me feel like I was the most fascinating person in the world. He was the antidote to the numbness that had taken over my life, and I was addicted to him. The physicality of it, the intimacy, was a slow burn. It wasn't just about the sex, though God knows that part was explosive. It was about the way he would look at me across a table, his eyes holding mine as if he were memorizing my face. It was the way he would brush his hand against mine in the car, a casual touch that sent a jolt of electricity through my entire body. It was the way he kissed me, like he was starved for me, like I was oxygen, and he had been holding his breath his whole life. We had sex for the first time in his bed on a rainy Thursday afternoon, when we both knew Mark was at a conference 200 miles away. It wasn't frantic or hurried. It was slow and deliberate, a careful exploration of each other's bodies. He was patient and attentive, worshiping every inch of me, making me feel things I had convinced myself I was incapable of feeling anymore.
When it was over, I lay in his arms, listening to the rain against the window, and I felt a profound and terrifying sense of peace. It was the peace of the damned, the calm before the storm. I knew I was playing with fire, but I was too far gone to care. I was in love with him. I was in love with the way he made me feel, and I was willing to burn my entire life to the ground to keep feeling it. The lie became my new reality. I became a master of deception. I constructed an elaborate web of alibis and excuses, a labyrinth of half-truths designed to keep Mark in the dark. Book club meetings that didn't exist, overtime at a job I hated, shopping trips that took 4 hours instead of 1. I would come home from seeing Marcus, my skin still tingling from his touch, my lips swollen from his kisses, and I would walk into my house and become a different person, the dutiful wife, the loving partner. I'd make dinner, ask Mark about his day, nod along to his stories about office politics, all while my mind was replaying the feel of Marcus's hands on my body. I was living 2 lives, and the strain of it was starting to show. I lost weight. I stopped sleeping. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing, consumed by a toxic cocktail of guilt and exhilaration. I was a fraud, a liar, a cheat. And the worst part was, I didn't want to stop. Mark began to notice. Finally, he wasn't a complete idiot, just a man who had been willfully blind. He started asking questions. "You seem distracted lately. Is everything okay?" He'd look at me with a furrowed brow, a flicker of concern in his eyes. I'd brush it off, blaming stress at work, hormones, anything to deflect his attention. He would accept my excuses, but I could see the doubt creeping in. He started checking up on me. He'd call me at work at odd hours, just to see if I was there. He'd be waiting for me when I got home, watching me with a look of quiet suspicion. The walls were closing in.
My secret life was a ticking time bomb, and the fuse was getting shorter by the day. One night, after a particularly intense afternoon with Marcus, I came home to find Mark sitting in the dark living room. He wasn't watching TV. He was just sitting there, in his armchair, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The room was silent. My heart dropped into my stomach. I knew the look on his face. It was the look of a man who had just discovered something he didn't want to know. I walked into the room, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. "Hey," I said, my voice falsely bright. "What are you doing in the dark?" He didn't answer for a long time. He just stared at me, his eyes cold and unreadable. Then he said, "I found this." He held up a receipt. It was from a restaurant Marcus and I had gone to, a place across town. He had put it in his pocket, the one I had been wearing that day, and I had forgotten to throw it away. Stupid. So stupid. My blood ran cold. I felt the floor drop out of under me. I opened my mouth to speak, to lie, to say anything, but no words came out. "Who is he, Alina?" Mark's voice was quiet, controlled, which was somehow scarier than if he had been yelling. "I called the restaurant. The waiter remembered you. He said you were with a man, a good-looking man with a beard." The jig was up. The elaborate fantasy I had constructed was crumbling around me. I had two choices. I could lie, dig myself deeper, try to spin another web of deceit, or I could tell the truth. I was so tired of lying. I was so tired of the double life. I was so tired of looking in the mirror and hating the person I saw. I looked at Mark, the man I had married, the man I had once loved with my whole heart, and I felt a wave of profound sadness. He looked so broken, so betrayed. I had done that. I had broken him, and there was no fixing it. "It's Marcus," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Our neighbor. I've been seeing him." The words hung in the air between us, ugly and raw. Mark flinched like I had slapped him. He put the glass of whiskey down on the table, his hand trembling. He didn't say anything. He just sat there, processing the information. I could see the wheels turning in his head, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The long hours, the distracted conversations, the sudden need to be outside all the time. It all made a horrible, awful sense. "For how long?" he finally asked, his voice cracking. "Weeks," I said. "A few months. I don't know. It feels like forever." "How could you?" he said, standing up. His voice was rising now, the controlled composure giving way to raw, unadulterated rage. "How could you do this to me? To us? We have a life together, a home, a future." "It wasn't a life," I shouted back, the dam of my own emotions finally breaking. I was crying now, hot, ugly tears streaming down my face. "It was a prison. You stopped seeing me, Mark. You stopped caring. I was just a piece of furniture in this house, and I couldn't breathe anymore." I told him everything. The loneliness, the nights I spent staring at the ceiling, the
সাগরের ঢেউ দেখিয়া নাই মন সাগরে, নানা মিলে সাধন ভজন সকলি যাই বিফলে গো, সকলি যাই বিফলে। ওরে রূপ সাগরের ঢেউ দেখিয়া নাই মন সাগরে, নানা মিলে সাধন ভজন সকলি যাই বিফলে গো, সকলি যাই বিফলে। আহা সাগরের দুই মোহনা, একটি আশায় একটি যাওয়া, সাধক যারা নাই মোতারা, সাধক যাহারা নাই মোতারা, সাধক যারা নাই মোতারা, সাধক সারা যাই ডুবে। রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে মনে, রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে। সাগরের খাইছো ননি আসিয়া এই ববেতে, ওরে আরেক সাগরটাকে তোমায় নিতে তার মোহনাতে গো, নিতে তার মোহনাতে। ও এক সাগরের খাইছো ননি আসিয়া এই ববেতে, আরেক সাগরটাকে তোমায় নিতে তার মোহনাতে গো, নিতে তার মোহনাতে। ওরে মোহনাতে জুয়ার বাটা, মোহনাতে জুয়ার বাটা, না জানিয়া যাব দিল দিলে মন মরবি অকালে। রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে মনে, রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে। সাগরের সাধক যারা তারা নাইমা সাগরে, আরে এক চুমুকে শুকাই পানি ডুবার বইতার না থাকে গো, ডুবার বইতার না থাকে। ওরে রূপসাগরের সাধক যারা তারা নাইমা সাগরে, এক চুমুকে শুকাই পানি ডুবার বইতার না থাকে গো, ডুবার বইতার না থাকে। ওরে জয় বেবে কয় সাধক সারা, জয় বেবে কয় সাধক সারা, জয় বেবে কয় সাধক সারা, জুয়ার আসলে যাই ডুবে। রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে মনে, রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে। রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে, রূপসাগরে ডুব দিও না সাঁতার না জানলে।
Dismissed. I told him about the window, about how Marcus had seen me, the real me, the one who was desperate and sad and angry. I told him about the connection, the feeling of being alive. I was brutal in my honesty, and the truth of it was a weapon. I was eviscerating him with my own pain. He listened, his face a mask of shock and devastation. He sat back down, his legs giving out under him. He looked defeated, broken. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of pure desperation. "So what now?" he asked, his voice hollow. "What do you want?" It was the million-dollar question. What did I want? I had been so caught up in the affair, in the thrill of it, that I hadn't given much thought to the aftermath.
I thought about Marcus, about the future I had fantasized about with him, a future without secrets, a future where I was loved and seen and cherished, a future where I felt alive. But then I looked at Mark, at the man I had shared so much of my life with, and I felt the weight of what I was destroying. The house we had built together, the shared history, the promise of forever. I was standing at a crossroads, and both paths led to heartbreak. "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know what I want." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resentment. "Well, you have to figure it out," he said, standing up. He walked toward the door. "I can't be here right now. I need to think." He walked out the front door, slamming it behind him. I heard his car start, the engine roaring to life, and then he was gone. I stood in the middle of the living room, completely alone. The silence was deafening. I had just destroyed my marriage. And for what? For a man who lived across the street? For a feeling? For a window that was open? I walked upstairs, on autopilot, and stood by the bedroom window. I looked across the way. The light was on in his window. He was standing there. He was watching me. He knew. He must have seen the fight, the slammed door, the aftermath. I stood there, a broken woman, looking at the man who had shattered my life. He raised his hand in a wave, but I didn't wave back. I just stood there, frozen, consumed by the enormity of what I had done. The game was over. The window was just a window again, and I was left staring into the void, wondering how I had gotten so lost. I didn't move from that window for what felt like hours. I stood there, a statue of guilt and regret, watching the light in Marcus's window burn steadily, a beacon I no longer had the right to follow. He kept his hand raised for a long time. waiting for a response that never came. Eventually, he dropped it, and I saw his silhouette turn away from the glass.
The light clicked off. The window remained open, but it was just a dark rectangle now, an empty frame. He was giving me space. He understood that my world had just collapsed, and he had the decency to back off. But his understanding only made me feel worse. It was easier to hate him, to blame him for the mess I had made. It was easier to make him the villain. But I knew the truth. The villain was standing right here, in this room, staring at her own reflection in the dark glass. I finally tore myself away from the window and sat down on the edge of the bed. The house was too quiet. It was the kind of quiet that presses in on you from all sides, a heavy, suffocating blanket. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. These were the sounds of my life, the sounds I had taken for granted, and now they felt like the echoes of a world I had just destroyed. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over Marcus's name. I wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to have him tell me everything was going to be okay. But I knew it wasn't. Nothing was ever going to be okay again. I put the phone down. I couldn't run to him. I had to face the wreckage I had created. The hours crawled by. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, waiting for Mark to come back. I rehearsed what I would say, 1,000 different apologies, 1,000 different explanations, but none of them felt adequate. How do you apologize for annihilating someone's trust? How do you explain that you were so unhappy that you burned your whole life down? There was no good answer. There was just the cold, hard truth. I had been selfish, and I had been cruel, and I had broken the one person I had promised to protect. He came back around 3 a.m. I heard the front door open, the familiar click of the lock. His footsteps were heavy on the stairs, each one a countdown to the inevitable confrontation. He walked into the bedroom and stood in the doorway, looking at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale and drawn. He looked like he had aged 10 years in a single night. He was holding a duffel bag, I noticed. My stomach lurched. "I can't stay here," he said, his voice flat. "I need some space. I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a while." I wanted to beg him to stay. I wanted to throw myself at his feet and plead for forgiveness, but I knew I had no right. I had forfeited that right the moment I walked across the lawn to Marcus's house. I just nodded, unable to speak. He walked to the closet and started pulling out clothes, throwing them into the bag with a mechanical efficiency that was somehow more devastating than anger. He was packing his life, his presence in our home, into a single canvas bag. He didn't look at me while he did it. He treated me like I wasn't there. "Mark," I finally managed, my voice a croak. "Please, can we just talk?" He stopped packing. He stood there, his back to me, his shoulders rigid. "I don't have anything to say to you," he said. "Not right now." He turned around, and I saw the tears in his eyes, the tears he was trying so hard to hold back. "I loved you, Alina. I loved you more than anything. And you threw it all away. For him. For our neighbor. How fucking cliche can you get?" The words hit me like physical blows. He was right. It was cliche. It was the oldest story in the book. The bored housewife. The handsome stranger next door. The affair that destroys everything. I had become a walking stereotype, and the shame of it was suffocating. He finished packing and walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the frame. "I need you to think about what you want," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But I need you to be honest with yourself, because I can't live like this. I can't live in a world where I'm not enough for you." He left. I heard the front door close, and then there was silence. The house was empty. I was completely and utterly alone. I sat there in the darkness, staring at the space where my husband had just been, and I felt a grief so profound it was physical. It was a hollow ache in my chest, a void that I had created with my own hands. I had wanted to feel alive, and now I felt more dead than ever. In the days that followed, I became a ghost in my own home. I didn't go to work. I didn't answer my phone. I barely ate. I just drifted from room to room, reliving every moment of the past few months, torturing myself with the memories. I thought about the first time I saw Marcus in the window. I thought about the way my heart raced when I saw his name on my phone. I thought about the feeling of his hands on my skin. And every time I did, I felt a fresh wave of guilt. It was a poison, and I couldn't stop drinking it. Marcus tried to reach out. He left voicemails, sent texts. He asked if I was okay. He said he understood if I needed space. He said he was there for me. His kindness was a knife in my gut. He was the reason I was in this mess, and yet he was the only one who seemed to care. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every time I thought about him, I thought about Mark's face, the devastation in his eyes. I had become the villain of my own story, and I didn't know how to rewrite the ending. A week passed, then two. I was a shell of a person, going through the motions of survival but not really living. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. It was a woman. Her voice was shaky, hesitant. "Is this Alina?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my heart starting to pound. "This is Sarah," she said, "Mark's sister." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had never spoken to a sister directly, only exchanged pleasantries at family gatherings. She had always been a peripheral figure in my life, but now she was a representative of the world I had betrayed.
"Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What's going on? Is Mark okay?" "He's in the hospital, Alina. He had a breakdown. He's been having panic attacks. He couldn't breathe. They admitted him for observation." The world tilted on its axis. The room started to spin. Mark was in the hospital. My husband, the man I had cheated on, was in a hospital because of me. I had broken him so thoroughly that his body was physically rebelling. The guilt was overwhelming. It was a tidal wave that crashed over me and pulled me under. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I need to see him." She hesitated. "I don't think that's a good idea, Alina. He's fragile. Seeing you might make things worse. Please," I begged, the tears streaming down my face. "Please, Sarah. I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve to be there, but I need to see him. I need to tell him I'm sorry." She was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed. "He's at St. Mary's, room 412. But Alina, if you make this worse, if you upset him, I will never forgive you." I promised her I wouldn't. I hung up the phone and grabbed my keys. I drove to the hospital in a fog, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles were white. The world outside the car window was a blur. I was on autopilot, running on pure adrenaline and desperation. I found his room. I stood outside the door, my hand hovering over the handle. I could hear the low murmur of a television inside. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. He was sitting up in bed, looking out the window. He was wearing a hospital gown, and he looked pale and thin. His face was gaunt, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. He turned when he heard the door open, and when he saw me, his expression was a mixture of shock and pain. I had never seen him look so broken. "Alina," he said, his voice hoarse. "What are you doing here?" I walked into the room, my legs shaking.
I sat down in the chair next to his bed, not trusting myself to stand. I reached out and took his hand. He didn't pull away, but he didn't hold on either. "I'm so sorry," I said, the words tumbling out of me in a rush. "I am so, so sorry, Mark. I know it doesn't mean anything. I know I can't take it back. But I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I was so lost, and I made the worst mistake of my life." He listened, his eyes fixed on the wall. He didn't say anything. He just let me talk. I told him everything, how I had felt invisible, how I had felt like I was drowning, how I had convinced myself that what I was doing wasn't really wrong because I was so unhappy. I told him about the moment I knew I had lost myself, the moment I realized I was capable of destroying the one person I loved most in the world. I wasn't making excuses. I was just telling him the truth, the ugly, brutal truth. When I was done, I was crying again. I didn't care anymore. I had no pride left. I just wanted him to know that I was sorry, that I would spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to him, if he would let me. He finally looked at me. His eyes were tired, sad, but they weren't filled with anger. They were filled with a profound sense of loss. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," he said, his voice soft. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, but I want to try, Alina. I want to try for us." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a glimmer of hope, the first one I had seen in weeks. I leaned forward and rested my head on his chest, my tears soaking through the thin fabric of the hospital gown. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was home. But the relief was short-lived, because as I sat there, holding my husband's hand, I knew that this wasn't the end. I had only told him part of the story. I had confessed to the affair, but I hadn't told him the full extent of it. I hadn't told him I was still in love with Marcus, and I hadn't told him the truth about the accident that changed everything. It happened 2 nights after Mark left for his brothers. I was alone in the house, trying to drown my sorrows in a bottle of cheap wine. I had been drinking for hours, trying to numb the pain. I was in no state to drive, but I didn't care. I wanted to see Marcus. I needed to see him. I needed to feel something other than the crushing weight of my own shame. I drove to his house, my vision blurry, my reaction slow. I don't remember getting there. I don't remember knocking on his door. I just remember waking up in a hospital bed, a blinding pain in my head, and a nurse telling me I had been in a car accident caused by a drunk driver who had run a red light and slammed into my car, sending it spinning into a light pole. And Mark didn't know about it. He didn't know his wife had almost died. But Marcus did. He was the one who found me. He saw the accident from his window. He ran out into the street and pulled me from the wreckage, just before the car caught fire. He saved my life. He was at the hospital every day, for a week straight, sitting by my bedside. He held my hand, he talked to me, he begged me to wake up. I owed him my life, and I owed Mark the truth about it. Now, sitting in this hospital room, holding Mark's hand, I knew the truth was going to come out. It always does. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that when it did, the fragile reconciliation we were trying to build would shatter into a million pieces. I was still keeping a secret from my husband, a huge, life-altering secret, and the weight of it was going to crush me. I looked up at Mark, his eyes closed, his breathing finally steady. He was resting. He was trusting me, and I was about to betray him all over again. Not with an affair this time, but with the truth.